Hello, Fruit Force. Once again, this is Captain Fruit reporting for duty, and today I want to discuss something. Now, I'm granted this has already been covered, and if you want to see some more extensive coverage on the acts themselves, I would recommend checking out that Umbrella Guy's channel and Yellow Flash. They've covered this quite extensively, but I would like to talk about that part briefly, but I want to expand on it from a Christian perspective, or from another element of view, if you will. Now, as you know, it's pretty popularly noted right now that on Easter, which happened to fall on April Fool's this year, which creates a whole new time for people to step out of their comfort zones to make sure they can bash Christianity and try to feel guilt-free about it. Antos posted this tweet here. He has risen with 3 exclamation points, like, yay, and then, just kidding, April Fools. Once again, why is it okay to persecute Christians? Now, granted, from a business perspective, you should never be criticizing your customer base. It's bad business. But also, what kind of hatred must you have to constantly want to pick and berate people for things that they base their life around? Some people responded, for example, this gentleman here, in all seriousness, what was the point of this, besides the obvious pop shot at religion? It's not clever. A low-hanging fruit, dad joke. For someone calling themselves a writer, you could dig deeper for something more insightful than OMG, they fell on the same day, tee-hee. Now, with a snarky retort, Antos says, you must be misinformed. I'm not a writer. But here's the thing. They love to defend themselves by twisting and manipulating the real situation. Because remember, right here, she said she's not a writer, correct? But yet, right in her very own Twitter feed, she advertises an article that she has written. My first article for Union Co. is live. It's a topic that is very important to me, and I'm so thrilled that the Wonder Cow asked me to help him with it. So, right here, you're a writer, but then when somebody throws back at you and says, hey, you're a writer, you say, well, I'm not a writer. Well, which is it? Are you a writer or not? Also, her job was an editor from Harvard, which means you should have some level of tact and understanding writing. But that's just the beginning of this tale. The response to that tweet she made was generally quite positive. People saying things like that question there that was asked, nothing really harsh there. People saying they'll pray for her. People saying, why would you say something like that attacking people? But her response was to twist it as if she was being attacked. She loves to make this narrative and then act like she was assaulted because of it. She is a person that likes to be the victim. She did it with Marvel Comics to gain attention, and now she's doing it here again. Her response was, the best April Fool's joke would be if Twitter said they would start enforcing policy against accounts that promote violence and hate speech. LOL, am I right? But yet she just committed hate speech against Christians. As the Umbrella Guy, that Umbrella Guy mentioned it, I think he was a very good point too. Most people that are going to be following her are going to believe things like Wikipedia for the definition, and even under Wikipedia's definition, her own statement would be considered hate speech. Now that's the part I wanted just to briefly talk about because they covered it very well. Definitely check Yellow Flash in that Umbrella Guy section. But let's talk about this, about hate speech. She thinks she's punching up, if you will. She's standing up against the man and being witty at the same time while she feels that she is being persecuted. But is she really the one being persecuted? Because let's look at this a little bit deeper. You can go to a Newsweek article by Christina Maza on January 4th on 2018 that said Christian persecution and genocide is worse now than any time in history. So says this report. And if you look into the report, it says the persecution of genocide of Christians across the world is worse today than any time in history, and Western governments are failing to stop it. In a report from Catholic organizations said, the study by Aid to the Church in Need said the treatment of Christians has worsened substantially in the past 2 years compared to the 2 years prior and has grown more violent in any other period in modern times. Not only are Christians more persecuted than any other faith group, but ever-increasing numbers are experiencing the very worst forms of persecution, the report said. That's quite interesting, isn't it? The report examined the plight of Christians in China, Egypt, India, Iran, Nigeria, North Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and many other places, lasting from 2015 through 2017. And the research showed that in that time, Christians suffered crimes against humanity, and some were hanged or crucified. The report found that Saudi Arabia was the only country where the situation for Christians did not get worse. Now that might seem like, oh, okay, that's some good note, but that's only because the situation really couldn't get any worse than it already was. That's why they were already treated at the worst way possible. The report also focuses on Middle Eastern countries like Iraq and Syria. Once again, remember, a lot of these people like this Heather Antos, these SJWs, always talk about how women are marginalized and these groups are, but let's look at this. Iraq and Syria, where the author argued that Christians would have been entirely wiped out if it weren't for military action and the assistance of Christian humanitarian organizations, like Aid to the Church in Need. Once again, who's the real marginalized here? The same article mentions in Africa a report focused on countries like Sudan, where the government ordered that churches be destroyed, in Nigeria, where ISIS-affiliated groups like Boko Haram have led a surge in attacks on Christians. Hundreds of Christians have been rounded up and imprisoned over the past years just because of their faith. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a whole lot worse than fat shaming. Not saying any of these things are good and things like that, but, you know, these small little differences in opinions and things. It's absolutely ridiculous. The same report further documents that numerous case studies in which Christians in countries such as India and Nigeria have been murdered or beaten for practicing their faith. And this is nothing new. This has been going on for a very, very long time. A Christian pastor in India was, and this is in quotes by the way, a Christian pastor in India was left in a coma after being beaten in a planned attack apparently carried out by Hindutva extremists. The report noted, before slipping into unconsciousness, the pastor told police that the attack was religiously motivated. And in quotes, "You must never come to our village to pray. You should never enter our village," the men told the pastor, according to a report. So why am I mentioning this? Once again, I want to mention this because once again here, Heather Antos, as usual, claims they're the one harassed, as she was attacking Christians with her tweets. Now let me ask, from what I've just explained to you, compared to her tweets, which has been worse? Let's use another source just to make sure, because I always like using more sources. In this one, you can find the Christians facing worst prosecution in history, the report says. And this came from the Catholic Herald, so you know, understand the source here of it. Posted Thursday, 12th of October, 2017 by a staff reporter. It said, Christians today face worse persecution than any time in history, yet the UN and the international community are largely ignoring them. Of course. Absolutely, because we're getting persecuted. Persecuted and forgotten. That's exactly. The report accuses the international community of failing to respond adequately to the violence, stating governments in the West and the UN failed to offer Christians in countries such as Iraq and Syria the emergency help they need as genocide is underway. And in quotes, if Christian organizations and other institutions had not filled the gap, the Christian presence could already have disappeared in Iraq and other parts of the Middle East. So once, I just cannot stress this enough, you go back to her tweets and she was being harassed. I'm sorry, but a tweet saying we'll be praying for you or we feel bad for you, why would you do this, is harassment compared to being crucified, being imprisoned, being beat to death? I don't think Heather Antos has a true grip on reality. But is this anything new to Christians? No. And so we're used to this, and we can take this heat. So let's look at some verses about persecution, and once again, even a more telling reason, knowing that we're getting persecuted and how much worse Christians do have it. I'm going to use the NIV Bible for this, and if we look at 2 Timothy, I can't speak all of a sudden, 3:12, it says, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." Or how about John 15:18? "If the world hates you, you know it has hated me before it hated you." These hopefully also, by the way, these verses will help inspire you, as you know that some of these people in the world will constantly beat us down and persecute us while claiming we're persecuting them. Matthew 5:44, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And we've seen a large amount of that towards Heather Antos. People saying, hey, I'm going to pray for you, as well as Eric Larson. I did it myself and just in a live stream recently. As I said, we don't sit there and we don't yell at them and condemn them and want them to die like they're saying about us. Instead, we love and pray for them. 1 Peter 4:12 through 14. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice as far as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory of God rest upon you. And I want you to truly think about that. When we're feeling the heat by all these people and everyone coming at us, think of 1 Peter 4:12 through 14. Another one too, 1 Peter 3:17. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than doing evil. Or Matthew 5:10. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So as you see, there's a large volume. That's just hitting the tip of the iceberg. Why not go through a few more? Let's turn to Luke 6:22. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you and revile you and spurn your name as evil, on account for the Son of Man. Or 1 Peter 3:16, having a good conscience, so that you are slandered. Those who revile you, good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. Or 1 John 3:13, do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. And I think that's a very good point right there. They hate you. And there's the last part I really want to put on this. As you see it, there's many more. I suggest checking out the Bible and verses about persecution. There's so many, and you can use that for as an uplifting moment. You know, it gives you an expectation. This is what's going to happen, but there is glory in that. We can bounce back from that. And these people that persecute us as Christians, or anybody as Christians, there's hatred in their hearts. They're damaged in ways. They're suffering. There's something that's happened to them. I'm not picking on atheists here and things. Atheists, usually, they're not going to attack Christians and persecute. They just don't believe that there is hope. Yeah, you know, they never know. They just haven't had that moment. Same with these other people. And we can't persecute them and turn it around and go back against them in the same way. We have to show love for them. And granted, it's not going to be easy. This is nothing new. These people have issues. It'd be very interesting to look into people like Heather Antos' history and see what really caused her to hate. If you look, most people that sit there and go out of their way to hate people and persecute people because of their faith tend to have something in their history that happened negatively that maybe had a link to faith somehow indirectly. Maybe somebody was claiming to be a Christian wronged them, or they thought they turned to somebody for help and they didn't get the help they needed. They fell through the cracks. Who knows what it is? But they turn around and they blame all Christians for that. There's some damage there, or they just feel, why could God let this happen to me? Where they haven't really created that relationship with Christ yet to know any different. Or they say, oh, he just doesn't exist, it's created by man, because they don't have that relationship. They've never tried to create that relationship with Christ. I challenge anybody to crack open that book. Start diving into it daily. Spend time with it by yourself in quiet, or with your kids too also as well. Both, if you have them in your family. Spend it with the family. Spend it with your kids. Spend it by yourself. You are going to create a deepening in your relationship with Christ, and you will find out through your heart that it is true, that he is true, that he is risen, and he is there for you. And if not, what is the worst that could happen? Is there anything in there that could make you a bad person? No. You can only do good. All right, I know this was a preachy soapbox kind of video here, but, you know, I'm fine with that, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to hit like and subscribe and hit that notifications bell, because if you haven't noticed, videos like this tend to get people like me hidden from YouTube. They don't want to promote me. If you also want to help support our channel, you can go to the link below and hit our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And if you don't feel you want to do it, that's perfectly fine too, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, keep it frugal.